Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Nuala Norton, and welcome to the Coin Republic. I'm here today with Micah Ray, aka the journalist, a fellow journalist in the NFT space, whose story from a meteoric rise from homelessness to selling his first NFT for almost $5,000 is certainly reassuring, to say the least. Thanks very much for joining us, Mika. Now, where should we start? Should we start at the beginning of you say homeless? How did that come about? And this was only a couple of
Um,
years ago, right?
yes, I had a rare form of cancer that was in my foot, and it was steadily getting worse. And I needed to either have a lot more money and some great insurance, or I needed to be destitute in order to have it treated. So it was easier to be destitute. Um, and so that's what I chose to do so I could have it treated in time, because at some point it would then have traveled through my lymph nodes and then it would be all over the place.
So
Yeah.
that's scary in the first place. Being diagnosed with such a virulent cancer, let alone putting yourself in the position of being homeless at the same time.
Yeah, but there's a very functional way that you can minimize your footprint and reduce, things down and operate and function. So fortunately, I think for me, um, having sort of had difficulty in the past and overcame that, having experienced being homeless before, and really not have had dealt with that for over a decade, but it wasn't something that was completely unfamiliar to me. So I was able to do that, still continue forward with what I was trying to accomplish, and then ultimately, even through blockchain education and crypto, it escalated that for me. And that
So,
was during the pandemic as well.
oh
Yes.
crikey, triple
Yeah.
whammy. Um, so how is the situation with the cancer now?
So far, so good. I'm sure I'll go back in and have more testing done, but the real understanding, or the thing to come away from it, was to understand that it had not yet traveled. They did those tests, which was really important. So yeah, I'm very optimistic, and I feel great. So it's a form of cancer that actually is in your foot. It is similar to the cancer that killed Bob Marley, coincidentally. So it's just very rare. Not very much of the population gets it, but it kind of starts as a little tumor, and it starts getting bigger, and then you kind of know it must be something serious.
My gosh.
Yeah.
So you made the decision to go homeless. So was that a physical move as well as an
Uh,
emotional decision?
well, yeah, because I actually subleased my apartment, um, so that way I could at least try to figure out how to return back to it, without giving up my apartment as well. So I basically rented it to some students who were here, and they were kind of stuck during the pandemic, so it worked out. And then I basically lived in a tent, not far from the actual Skid Row, where I am now. And I continued to learn about crypto. I was in social audio apps for a lot of the time, and I was learning and applying things, and was able to generate some income in crypto. And now I'm pretty much primarily working it for crypto. Every now and then I do get US dollars. Like I have a project that's going in print in Texas, Houston, and Dallas. So because it's a Web2 publication, they'll probably pay me in US dollars. And then there is a London publisher that will wire payment, in which case it's not using the blockchain at all, in which case your bank account needs to be connected. But for the most part, the publishers actually pay in crypto, and even people who contract you for, say, copywriting or maybe writing their roadmap or doing some other kind of editorial work, they're generally paying in crypto. So I'm almost completely operating in crypto, only cashing out, what I need or want to budget out of what is being made. Because ultimately, I think that it is a currency that people need to invest in a dollar cost average way where it's not hurting you, but you're able to incrementally over time continue to invest. Because I do believe that there is a future for it. As up and down as it is, there will be a future for this currency.
Well, yes, it's not that much different from the forex market, really, isn't it? No, there's up peaks and troughs. Yeah. So how do you find the mainstream press in terms of that aren't in the NFT space? Are they savvy enough about the whole NFT thing in order to be able to pay you in NFTs? Are they as interested in the stories? They just think the readers aren't grown up enough yet.
Um, I think that there's like this bridge for sure between these two types of publications, and there's still an old school way of publishing that they don't understand. We're more in a creator economy now, which does make it different for me as a writer. I can write articles and I can broker them to anyone who is willing to pay or interested in publishing it. Whereas in the other model, I might have an employer, in which case everything that I write is assigned to me or is something they've approved for me to write. So it's just a little bit different world. And I have, even for the Paper City, which is in Dallas and Houston, I'm working with a Web2 situation. So it is different when you hand them your article and they just snatch it up and, they're going to go edit it, and then you'll just see whatever happened with that edit. It's not necessarily a conversation between you two. Whereas in Web3, I'm more in control of my content, and therefore I'm able to negotiate the edit and work in collaboration with the editor to prepare the piece for publishing.
You were saying about that there is a kind of bridge between the NFT journalism world and the
Oh,
mainstream press.
yeah, where there's a bridge where there are people who are curious or perhaps have heard of Web3 or crypto or NFTs, but don't know a lot about it. Um, they need to understand what's happening in a more accessible way. And then at the same time, in Web3, they cannot continue to only rely on the existing market base of consumers to constantly sell things to. There needs to be a more mainstream adoption. And the journalism is a way to bridge that. And I often, through my articles, approach it that way, where I can introduce some concepts of blockchain technology or use case and sort of tell a story that is more creator driven or human, so you can connect the dots and see how this person is using the technology versus this person being some type of a genius coder or someone who is very likely to be doing this. I think it's really important to understand that the technology is not going to go anywhere. It's really helping a lot of industries, and it's going to actually continue to blossom.
Okay, so did you have a history of journalism? Was that your background before
Uh,
you? Mm-hmm.
Before the blockchain and before the pandemic, no. However, I did go to the University of Oregon, which is a very top journalism school. That was my major. I did not pursue the profession as I came out of college. However, I was always a pretty good writer. It's interesting now to think that over time, the average person's writing has digressed and eroded so dramatically that my writing is actually better now than it was at the time, which was still better than average, is now seemingly much better than average. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
able to write these articles in a way that perhaps can engage people better. I don't know. I just
Mm.
noticed that the quality of writing in general has has decreased over this period of time, me being 53 now, and sort of the way that I was taught to write.
And you're obviously a natural storyteller as well. So, so, so let's get back to the pandemic and what happened after that. What was your first story, published story?
The first story I did was about an artist, and it was actually a publication that is no more. I've outlived a couple of publications already in this period of time. So there was a publication called NFTs Daily, and it was by the Krasenstein brothers, who they started a publication called The Hill Reporter, and it seemed that they were keen on starting a publication in the space, but then they got really caught up with the BitClout thing, and I think they just decided, okay, we're going to just put everything into BitClout. So they abandoned the paper. So I had written maybe 2 articles perhaps with them before another opportunity came. This was in early, maybe February of 2021, when the crypto boom was just like beginning, and all the NFTs were just beginning to take off selling. So the second or third article, I know I wrote about Gary Vee and his drop, whenever that was. And I also wrote about a collection called the Crypto Pills, which was 10,000 pieces that sold out in about 11 minutes. It was kind of a cool to write a story before that collection launched, because you could see that there was a lot of energy around it. So it was definitely a different time, and I know that over time I stopped covering collections so much, and I wanted to focus more on arts and culture, because there was too much conversation about what to buy, what crypto's up or down, and all these things that whatever you're writing could be really outdated, or you could be really wrong. You could steer people in the wrong direction. And so I really didn't want to write about those things. So I started to begin to cover arts and culture, creators' journey, people innovating, people who are building things. And those stories are a lot more timeless. And I think for the people who are featured, they can look back at it 5-10 years and see where they are now and really kind of appreciate it more. And for the people that are reading, they're able to learn something from people who are doing something right now, and they can kind of see how they're utilizing these new tools to accomplish what they're doing.
And you really came from a standing start in this. Then, how does an aspiring journalist make inroads to having your bulging contact list now? Has audio platforms worked well for you in that?
They have, but to be honest, there just were not any other journalists. Even the journalist that beat me for best written coverage of NFTs, it was more of a popularity contest. He had a huge Twitter following, and he got the votes in, but he's not even writing anymore. So there's a real shortage of writers, because the model to sort of sustain yourself is different. Since there's not really any ads in Web3, that revenue's not there to fund a publication, so they have to figure out other ways to be funded, and then maybe that affects the kind of content that they want to allow to be written about. So it's just interesting, So I was able to get in when there was really no other journalists, and a new DAO was starting. The first DAO-run news publication started, and I was one of the first 20 writers on that. It's really not publishing anymore. I kind of outlived them as well. It went from 20 writers down to me finally, and when I stopped writing there, they just stopped publishing. But it was a good opportunity to really write more and be actually paid. You're sort of being paid per word, so you kind of have this range for an article length, and you're turning those in, and you're at least getting compensated. So because the DAO was funded, it enabled me to write and be able to be paid for it, which was great. I still have outlets like that, and then I have stuff that I put out because I just feel it should be put out, and nobody's paid me at all. But I have to really manage my time to understand like what I can do and how much I can do, for stories that need to be told versus how am I going to actually sustain everything that I'm doing. It's a delicate balance.
Well, you're working it, you're balancing it fine.
Trying to.
Now, it's one thing to have a nickname, but for a journalist to be nicknamed the journalist, um, is it may sound obvious, but who was it that dubbed you the journalist, and how did that
um,
story happen?
so there was a clubhouse room, and the
A
very well-known
Clubhouse is the
audio
audio
app,
only platform. Yeah.
yes. And Russell Simmons, who's one of the godfathers of hip hop, was in a room, and he was talking about a drop. It was going to be a collection of NFTs, and there was going to be a marketplace and some other financial instruments. Trying to remember exactly, but there were things about it that I felt was predatory in its model and its approach to gathering that community together under the guise of maybe helping more than it really was. And I took him to task. I asked him a number of questions that made him very uncomfortable. And at the time, I was just starting to write, so they knew that I was there to write a story, but he just couldn't get away from these questions I was asking. And even as other people were trying to continue the conversation, he kept saying, no, the journalist, I want to, speak to the journalist again.
All
And
right.
it cemented it in that moment. It was, people laugh about it now, but at the time it was kind of intense and a little confrontational, but he really sort of drove it home because he did not know my name.
Mm. And at first when like cub journalists start out, they kind of want to shy away from asking the difficult questions, and the questions that everyone else wants us to ask. So, uh, that one certainly worked out for you. What was did you interview Gary V?
So the Gary Vee article, interestingly enough, is one of the few that I actually did not get to interview him. However, the way that I approached the article was because he was such a popular person and had such this devout following, and he really released his NFTs in such a unique way. I realized, well, the real story here is the community that's going to buy these up immediately, and at some of them for 2.5 Ethereum, because they're not going to wait for the Dutch auction to continue to click down to a
Mm,
point where a whole bunch of people can buy it now, and then they're going to buy it up. So a Dutch auction works from a high number and keeps going down, and you better buy it wherever you can buy it, however much you have, so it doesn't fall into the hands of people down at 0.5 who will just be ready to buy it. So
mm,
I decided to talk to his fans instead, and I interviewed a number of them for this article, which sort of encompassed his entire journey, people who listen to him every day while they're working or cleaning house, all the way to people who maybe were just starting to come around because they knew about NFTs and he was doing an NFT project. And the article was great, and I did hear from his team that they were very happy with it, which for me, I was proud of that because I didn't have enough pull at the time to really actually get the Gary Vee interview. Whereas
mm,
now, maybe 50-50 or more, I can actually get the actual interview with the person, which recently Snoop Dogg's son, I was able to interview him in person. It was a video interview, which was different than a written article, and I was able to ask him some great questions and get a good 20 minutes of edited final interview from that. And that's something that I'm going to want to do more of moving forward whenever I get a chance. Because as a photographer, then I can actually take photographs and include that to have video, photographs, and then the written copy.
okay. So how did your first NFT come about? What just take us through that?
So that project was the Mutniks, which is actually a really fascinating project. It was celebrating the first dogs that were sent to space before they could send humans. They needed to send up an animal to be able to test various things. So a lot of the dogs did not make it back. Some of them did, but many died. So this was a 50-year anniversary of the Mutniks, the Russian dogs that were sent to space. So they released a generative art collection. So that was the early days where a lot of these drops were happening in, once again, an audio app like Clubhouse. And so the entire story of how the Mutniks began and how the collection began, it was all told in Clubhouse, and I recorded it. So what I did was I cut the dialogue up to make a very succinct storyline using all of their contributions on the team who had spoken that day. And then I put visuals to it that applied to the collection and the different Mutnik dogs and old photographs of these dogs that were in the capsules that went up to space. So I created a news video that was really more of an audio with a visual accompaniment to their own audio. And that became the NFT that I sold on the blockchain. So it was kind of the first of its kind. It took a lot of time to make that, or else I would probably be making them on a regular basis. I know how I did it, but to put that much time in, it would really, and then that format is not something that publishers are interested in quite yet. So I didn't think that I would be able to continue to do those on a regular basis and have them necessarily funded by people who found them of great value. I may revisit that down the road, but it was too labor intensive, basically.
And so, I mean, to go for almost $1.5 Ethereum, which is like $4,750 or something like that at the time.
Yeah, at the time, yeah.
Was that just a stroke of luck? Did that take a particular marketing stream, or how did you go about actually letting people know?
So I do remember at that time too, there were drop rooms. It was much easier for the community to just gather and hear about somebody's project. Over time, that soured because too many people, you went from 17 or 18 million in NFT sales in 2020 to 17 billion in NFT sales in 2021. It got to be so crowded. But at one point in time, there were fewer projects. The community would gather quite organically, and you'd be able to talk about your project, and that's what I actually did. And I remember the actual collection purchased that NFT because they found it so valuable for their own marketing and to spread the word of their project. And they have utilized it so well that they are now involved, members of that are involved with Space Plus. They were part of another project with St. Jude's that sent NFTs to space, and the money that was raised went to kids, St. Jude's. So this particular collection, I've used that NFT that I created as part of their marketing. And so I realized when they spent that amount, it really was probably very relative to what I might have charged to do something like that. It's quite interesting now how they've used it as a media piece and justified them spending almost 5,000 at the time, which, even though they didn't ask for it, I think what they were really trying to say is, this is the value of this that we see, that we're going to now utilize it. And so this is what we're going to pay for it. So I'm really fortunate, but it was a one of one versus what otherwise I might put out as news videos, and maybe there's 100 of those or 1,000. Now maybe people can just pay the small amount to just do their little part for journalism. Maybe it's only 0.01 or something. So I have thought of these things like, well, maybe people in general will just support by buying one, even though you can go onto the blockchain and just watch it without buying it at all. You can just watch it. It plays in rotation.
But you can watch it, but you don't have it. So this collective, presumably you can talk about them because they've already used
Yes,
your
the collection.
NFT.
Yes,
So who are they, and how did that come about?
So Mike Mongo and Kyle Schimber were the two primary people, but there was about a dozen contributors to the Mutniks project, Cosmic Pause. So they're all a group. So whether they all pitched in, or not, I don't know the details, other than I know that they sort of got everyone together and decided they were going to make this purchase. So it was kind of like the collection doing it to support what I had done, but also to own it and utilize it. I think they wanted to make sure that they were the owners of it since it was about them. I think that was also maybe part of it too. But I'm really grateful. Even now, Mike Mongo is headed to space. He is right now in astronaut training, and he is one of 5 Space Plus astronauts that were chosen through NFTs to go on the next commercial space flight, which I believe is Elon Musk, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Yes, yes. So it's
He
interesting
hasn't
to
actually
see.
gone up in one of his own rockets yet, has he?
No, I do not believe so. No. But it's interesting that he's allowing space and opportunity for people that otherwise would never get to go. But I think part of it is also to say, look, space is for everyone, and we need to test and essentially people are going to come back alive. It's not going to be like the Mutniks dogs, but we need to know, can someone over 60 go? Can someone, a child that's, 15 go? We need to understand that it cannot be these perfectly fit astronauts that have been, tested, exhaustingly, and we send them all the time. So I think what we're doing now is looking at kind of how spaceflight can now be really commercial.
How far down the road do you think that is? And how big a part do you think
Wow.
NFTs will play in that, and crypto, for example?
That's a good question. It could be that, maybe certain funding sources, it might be easier to contribute in crypto for some people. Um, it could be that the blockchain technology in some way is going to facilitate some expedition of things. Who knows? Maybe, just the technology alone, maybe the open source aspect, even though, entities like NASA, et cetera, they don't really open source much. Um, Maybe more leaps and bounds could be done when there's more open source technology to share information and knowledge and resources through the blockchain. And maybe then communities are able to have their own expeditions. Maybe that's what it's going to take. Because right now there's a commercial pace funded by commercial interest and interests that have nothing to do with us necessarily. And so I think it's going to be pushed by real innovation when other competitors can come in.
Do you think also it might play a part in scientific funding?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of it might even be socio-political, the way some political groups see this stuff, whether it's important or not, or whether, humankind should be going off into space. There's probably a lot of weird, difficult conversations around that. So maybe too, you're right. Maybe when we reach a point where there's more of a concerted effort by all mankind, maybe, I don't know, maybe that does the trick too and expedites things.
And what's bored AF? I mean, we can guess, but
Ah,
how did that come about?
I was really tired of writing for other people, tired of trying to figure out what I could pitch and get paid to write. And I had decided that I had reached at least some element of my own notoriety, that people were following me more so than even where the writing was. And so I realized, okay, with the creator economy that we're in, I can start a publication and I can scale it over time, but right now it'll just be like what I'm writing. And then maybe I'll curate in some good writing from other writers that have their articles elsewhere. And so it's like a newsletter right now. But it's also kind of a lifestyle thing because it doesn't say crypto or blockchain or Web3 in the title. It's really Bored AF, which is really people who are more sophisticated in the culture now, and they're a little bored of the regular stuff. They want to see some really cool things. They want to read really cool stories. And then maybe there's some really cool merchandise that they can have in the real world that tells people that they are part of this, movement. So The Board AF is going to be moving forward, going to be a real brand as well, where there's going to be various merchandise and things that people who are doing reading, opening the newsletter, they can win things, and essentially there'll be kind of a catalog of things you can purchase. And then ultimately down the road, it'll be like a tokenized community where you can earn tokens from reading and sharing, and then you can then redeem the tokens for various merchandise. So instead of the sponsors coming in and buying ad space, I would rather have them create things that we can give away to the community that is reading. And that's going to be kind of a different model than I've really seen before. But I think it will endear the sponsors a little differently to give things away, but also creative things that are conceived maybe in a more genuine way. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. And I'm still in the beginning stages of making that reality happen, but that's the plan.
Okay. So, but without the advertising, like, and cash sponsorship, are you talking about a subscription base, or how do we keep this resilient?
So for the readers, it's free. So I'm really growing that number exponentially. And then for the sponsors, they're paying for the ability to give away free things. So instead of buying some ad space that might be quite a bit, they're then paying for more journalism to be created. And there's a campaign that's going to have like a free airdrop or some free NFT, or maybe you can redeem something to get like a special thing from the sponsor. And so we're just looking at ways that we can really encourage people to open the newsletter and actually take steps when they open it, because then engagement will be high. A lot of times newsletter opening, it drops down quite a bit. People don't want to pay attention anymore. So I'm just trying some different model that says, hey, every time you open this newsletter, you either win something, or you can, maybe claim something, or, you have the opportunity to get something for free. It's just going to be kind of the ethos of opening the newsletter.
So, is there a degree of gamification
A
involved in
bit,
this?
yeah, just a bit, yeah. How far I go with the gamifying, I don't know, right now. But it is something that you realize if people are going to be incentivized to read, then maybe they will read, because people are not necessarily reading anymore. So if you read something and there's really 3 brief, quick answers at the end, and you have to answer them right in order to possibly win something, sure, you can cheat around and maybe figure out who read it to give you the answers, but if it's only 5 or 6 minutes to read something, maybe you're really actually going to read it,
Fabulous. So
Yeah.
is that your next thing going forward, or what else? What other plates are spinning in your head?
I also have a idea for something that is going to be built, but it's going to take a bit of money. But the one thing that's really obvious is there's way more stories in Web3 and the blockchain than there are journalists to tell the stories. So this is kind of an amplification machine, which allows people to submit stories into it. And if they're voted up by people, they can be vetted for and validated for, being a true factual thing that can be reported on. And then reporters can be assigned to cover it. So the community is then more in control of what news comes out. And it's kind of an app, so it needs to be interacted with in that way. And once again, the incentive there is the more that you, sort of interact with news that you're voting up or down, the more you're able to submit your own news into it. So the tokens that you're earning are so you can submit your own stories in. Maybe you want to submit your own art. Maybe you want to have yourself covered as an artist, or maybe you're part of a group, or maybe you just did a release with a few other artists and you want some coverage. So it will allow people to participate in that and have somewhere to submit. But then the interesting thing is, with everyone voting that up or down, the news is still getting around. Whether it gets reported on or not, the beauty is people are kind of incentivized to stay up with what's going on in the community. And so I think it's just a great kind of awareness machine.
And of course, in terms of journalism students and interns, I mean, there's going to be a lot more
Yeah.
reporters needed in this space, as you said, and there's going to be a lot more crypto and NFT news evolving around the world and up,
Yes.
down, from here to the metaverse, really. So do you see that kind of thing happening in the universities in the States now? Are they already talking about, modules, for example, that on how to report NFTs and Web3 news?
I don't think they boiled it down to the quality and kind of reporting yet. I think right now there are a lot of people sort of that know somewhat enough to write about it, that are more traditional writers that are being asked to write about it, and that's why I think we're seeing a lot of the very shallow, very short pieces, and just covering exactly what happened without much insider perspective. Over time, as more people become knowledgeable, I think we'll see more in-depth writing. Unfortunately, now I just think there's a gap, and it's also because we're not able to monetize for writers quite yet. There's so, right at the end of Web 2, you had platforms like Medium and Substack where writers were able to support their own writing without working for anybody anymore. And now that needs to continue in Web 3, where that model, you still, as a writer, you need to build up your cachet, you need to build up your fan base in order to have that be able to compensate you. So even if I'm going to a publisher and I'm saying, hey, I'd really like you to buy this piece, or I want to write about this, are you willing to publish it there? Oftentimes what they're able to pay is it's not as much as you might be able to get from your own private sort of NFT making sources, is what I'm saying. And so it does give the creator more power to write about what they want, knowing they will probably have an outlet, because if I finish a story, you probably still want to publish it even if you were not the one to pay me for it. I can still probably go back to you and give it to you to publish. And if you like the story, you're going to publish it. So it still gives me power to possibly have that article funded another way and still have it go out through the publisher, who they're happy to have it. And then other times it might be something that, okay, the amount they're offering, this time I'm going to do it, knowing that there's other work out there that can kind of subsidize everything, because you have to ask yourself, if a journalist is going to do an investigative piece where it might take them 3 months to dig around and do some forensic wallet stuff and all these things, talk to the right people, there's really nothing to pay for all of that. What they're paying you for is the finished article right now, because you don't have a salary by a publisher to say, hey, you can work on this story for 3 months. We just don't have that yet, unfortunately.
No. And yet the Web3 news world, I mean, it's barely a toddler right now. And by the time it comes of age, I mean, because of that, I think you have the absolute ABC of what is a wallet and how many times has fungible been Googled these past couple of years. And then you've got way up to the developers and the really highly technical stuff and everything in between. So it's a vast landscape for journalists that are looking to specialize, really.
Yes.
It's there for the picking, really, at the moment, don't you think?
It really is. And, I've received good compensation to write articles now more in the private sector, because they understand the value of journalism. When you think about everything is happening so fast in our space, but it's all fleeting. It's real-time conversations and tweets. And if you're really trying to be here for the long haul and embed yourself and have longevity, people need to look you up and see real writing about you, not you tooting your own horn, but a journalist who's relevant in the space that's talking about what you're doing. This is all part of it. And so a lot of the Web 2 culture understands it. They understand this, so they're trying to commission these articles. What becomes dangerous is my choice of who I'm taking on to be able to do that. There's a lot of great stories where I'm fortunate that they see the value and maybe there's a commission. But what I have to be careful of is the collection that's going to rug pull, or a marketplace that is not really decentralized, and they want to just pay me to sort of soften what they're doing and kind of introduce it to a community that's trusting of what I'm saying, and therefore, find their way into the community differently. I have to be careful of covering that stuff. So it's very treacherous right now. Hopefully with what I'm building, there will be like a writer's room and a small team, and we can like vet things. We can do more research, and we can go, okay, this is why we don't want to cover this, or this is why we do want to cover this. And even though there's no money over here, the community really needs to understand this or read this story. So we're going to assign someone there anyway, to tell that story. And then that way there can be a nice balance, because we have reached a point, I believe, where journalists are losing a lot of credibility because you can buy one, you can just buy one and they can write up some fluff piece about you, some think piece, and you can dot the industry with various like glowing pieces about yourself and manufacture an existence that really isn't true. We've seen it. So it's just a really, really precarious space that we're in for journalism, how we're going to handle it in Web3, and if we're going to have any kind of ethics or ethos about doing this kind of work.
But also, I get you there, but also there is much more of an opportunity to specialize in specific areas, because there's it's from NFTs to the metaverse and beyond. There's so many areas that you can establish yourself as a specialist, and also this autonomous economy, really, of taking ownership of your own income. And that I think, and I'd like to know what you think, I think there's a much more much vaster opportunity for freelance journalists. As a lecturer, I used to say to my students, there's no such thing as an unemployed journalist. Because if you're not on staff and you're good enough at getting stories, then you can make a living as a freelance. I've been a freelance for 30 years. So what do you think of the opportunities then for freelance journalism, and for journalism to gain back some of its integrity as well?
Well, there's definitely the freelance market is alive and well, because, the dilemma not being able to be compensated enough by these fledgling Web3 companies is because the rate that they're offering is very Web2, in a space where private interest is willing to pay more for the same article. So what you're getting from from a commission kind of editorial standpoint is often 4 or 5 times more than what the publisher is able to offer. And that does really, really benefit the creator economy and independent journalism. However, then it still then becomes, what are you willing to take to write about what? I think that's really what becomes a factor. But if writers are more free to how they spend their time and what they write about, I just think that there's going to be better journalism, because generally speaking, entities, publishers, they're beholden to things that are, sometimes not in the best interest of the stories that need to be told. So if the writers can dive into them at whim as they want, and see things and pick up on it and report on it, we might have a really healthy space, with a lot of truth coming out,
Mm-hmm.
because then it won't be so easy to stifle and quiet that. Because
Mm-hmm.
even through my publisher now, that editorial leverage is not there. Maybe I'm putting it out through mirror.xyz, or even Medium, or maybe it's going out through my newsletters, or maybe it's going out through pieces on Twitter. You really
Mm-hmm.
can't. That's where the truth is unstifled, and really going out, and it's unfiltered, and it's told by a journalist that hopefully you can believe and trust.
Yeah, yeah, and we can believe and trust you. But also, what about the podcast and NFT radio space? Is that going to be a big part of your future plans?
That I know of, no. The videos that I'm doing are somewhat different in that they're kind of multi-angle. They more look like you sitting down with me, kind of like if you'd watch, some politician sit down with the journalist, you'd get the over-the-shoulder shot on the subject. It's more in the space, and then I can incorporate other footage of maybe what they're working on, maybe art they're drawing, things like that, and so it
Mm-hmm.
becomes more hopefully a little more engaging than a lot of the podcast stuff. But also because I can't really sit still like that, even when I'm interviewing people, I'm only capturing audio and I'm doing a bunch of other things. I don't have to be conscious of this presentation constantly. Um, and maybe it lends itself better to the type of writing I do, because some of the questions are designed in succession to get something out of someone that perhaps with the idea of the camera on them, maybe that's a different response.
Mm.
So I like how I'm doing it, and then I can also do my in-person sort of more docu-style coverage, and I think I'm just going to stick to those two formats for now.
So yeah, you can also do your in-person.
Yes, I can do the in-person, more docu-style coverage. So it's kind of maybe, one extreme or the other, but the ones I do in person are definitely, they're just, I'm utilizing more filmmaking skills, and it's kind of like a little more multi-camera. So when I do them, I feel like if I'm going to go out of my way, then that'll be the way that I'll do it.
Well, it sounds fantastic, and I, for one, will certainly be watching and waiting. Is there any
Thank you.
words that you would like to leave us hanging on?
No, but thanks for having me. It's great. It's great that discussions about journalism can happen. I think it's really important in Web3. Like you said, it's just a fledgling occupation, and I think it's really trying to figure out how important Web3 thinks journalism is. And I'm trying to convince people it is. And we're going to find out over time if this kind of, you know, uh, clickbaity kind of, I read the title and 3 sentences and now I've absorbed that news, if this is going to carry forward, and if it does what that means to, having granular detail or knowledge about anything. I don't know. I'm prone to think that we're going to reverse back the other way, but maybe, you'll have a chip in your brain and they'll be able to just dump it in there. You know, we're going to find out.
Oh, hopefully not. We've got contact lenses already doing that. Well, yes, Micah Ray, aka the journalist, thank you so much for joining us on the Coin
Thank
Republic,
you. Thank
and
you.
hope to see you again soon.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. All right. Bye.
I'm Nuala Norton. You've been watching the Coin Republic. See you next time.